Well, hello there, and welcome to A Film a Day with me, Jordan Woodley. The Exorcist, despite, of course, the growing and changing nature of and tastes of audiences, is without doubt one of the greatest horror films ever made. I will fight anyone on that point, because despite the fact that I have been or seen The Exorcist with people who haven't particularly been stirred by it and have, despite the fact that with the same types of people, I've shown them things like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which of course is about overstimulation and overwhelming your senses. You have it from like Alien, which of course is about the grotesque body horror nature of it. I do understand why people don't connect necessarily to The Exorcist, because I think the greatness of it is the nature of escalation, and it's a film that almost, I don't want to say subverts genre, but it exists in a time when you didn't need to follow certain genre conventions. For all intents and purposes, The Exorcist could have been advertised as a drama and then slowly unfold the horror nature of it. Because, and it's a funny thing rewatching it now, it is, for the first half, primarily a drama. It doesn't feel the need to put scares in at certain points. Horror follows the same structure as comedy. And of course, that's why we end up with the difference between comedies, quote unquote, and then comedy dramas, where comedies like Airplane or the Scary Movie films or the Seth Rogen type films really try to follow a structure of knowing that jokes must exist within a certain frame. There should be a rate of humour or a constant sense of humour escalating or releasing over the course of a film, where comedy dramas will tell a story that just so happens to have comedic elements in it. Now, to me, that's an incredibly binary way of looking at cinema, but that is how people's attitudes when it comes to genre and expectation and what they want when they go into the cinema. And I suppose in this respect, this is more like a horror drama than it is like a horror. Because similarly, horror works on that sense of escalation and release, where most horrors from the start of the film are trying to either build up to a horror or release the tension of horror. Whereas The Exorcist does not feel the need to do that. You get the opening scene, which is has this cerebral sense of disturb, where it's not necessarily trying to build up to a scare. It just simply unsettles you. I mean, the truth of it is the fact that actually the what you might call the prologue scene doesn't even really have any scares in it. It doesn't build to a big scare moment. It just creates atmosphere, and it establishes the fact that this film isn't going to be a sort of cut and dry character drama about, whether your young girl is suffering from some kind of undiagnosed psychosis, or whether she is actually possessed by the devil. By having that prologue scene, you get that sense of atmosphere, the sense that something potentially is happening beyond what is being presented in front of us. And it sort of plants the idea in your mind, particularly where, of course, Father Merrin is looking at the statue and the dogs are going crazy, and you just get that feeling like there is something in the air. And I think by starting with that, it establishes that no, this is not a drama, this is a, quote-unquote, a horror within the genre, but from that point on, as I say, the first half of the film takes its time, so that the first 30 minutes there aren't any scares in it, or the mildest of mild bumps, but that they aren't, as modern conventions would have, they aren't jump scares, or they aren't false jump scares, they aren't there to create an illusory sense of horror. It all feeds into the narrative. It all feeds into what will be paid off later on in the film, so that when you go back and rewatch the film, you notice things, you see things. You know, you might notice a tiny exchange between characters, and you think, "Oh, is that relevant? Is that not?" Of course, everything is relevant, but you get that sense of, oh, like a murder mystery, or a good murder mystery, there are layers and plants being set up, even when everything is normal. And so, you know, when you're watching the first half of the film, and you're following Regan and her mother and Father Carries, like I say, it plays out almost like an intimate character drama, you know, and you almost don't know, and the great thing about the film is you don't know who necessarily the protagonist is. You could interpret the film in different ways, because you could say Carys is the protagonist. Obviously, people mistakenly would think that the exorcist of the title, who is Father Merrin, is the protagonist. But of course, as it transpires, he exists in the prologue and then doesn't enter the narrative until well into the third act. And then, of course, the question of, well, perhaps Regan is the protagonist, or perhaps Chris is the protagonist. You can observe it from any of those three perspectives if you want, and you get a different interpretation of the film depending on which one of those perspectives you look into. And of course, going in, there is always that concern with this, is that, oh, this is a religious horror, therefore we have to exist in a world where within the context of the narrative, God must exist if the devil exists, because otherwise, either or a world where the devil exists at least, because of course when we get into the third act, it's indisputable. And again, The Exorcist smartly subverts that or challenges that, because we're in the anxiety and the tension and the escalation of Regan becoming more and more dangerous and self-harming and harming to other people. And of course, we see what she's like in her face, in her mannerisms. We immediately side with Chris, when Chris, of course, who goes from conventional sort of psychological examinations, physical medical examinations, and then when all other avenues are exhausted, then goes to something more supernatural. But the film constantly, even Father Carries spends a huge proportion of the film saying, "Are you sure? Are you sure?" This is supposed to exist in a sort of modern Catholic world where the idea of exorcisms, even to the church, are extreme and more damaging to the sort of the politics of Catholicism, because of course it feeds into the mysticism aspect, which Carries tries to say is something he wants to get away from as a man who is a psychologist. He wants to stay within the rational. But again, the film makes you challenge. Well, with my own eyes, I'm seeing what I think are indisputable evidence that this girl is possessed. And I know I'm in a horror film, so therefore she must be possessed. And yet, you then get challenged by the fact that, are we simply being drawn into an experience because we are viscerally being attacked by it? And that is similar to the experiences of people who do go in to exorcisms and demand exorcisms because they believe family members or friends are possessed. Are we simply part of the social psychosis of what is going on? Who's to say? And again, the beauty of the film is the fact that it subconsciously starts to put plants in your head. Famously, you have those flash frames of the demon, or Pazuzu, if you sort of from the greater mythology of the film, is constantly there in the film. His presence is there, and as I say, these flash frames in dreams or moments when Regan's fully possessed, you see him. And of course the music, the sound design, it all is just creating that atmosphere. As I said earlier at the beginning, it's not about trying to scare us with jumps. It's about trying to create an unsettled feeling, a sort of simmering atmosphere where something is wrong, but we can't put our fingers on what. And so when the horror comes, it's almost cathartic, but it's also it's almost prepared us in a way that we aren't, it gives us that greater sense of tension, because it's just been under the surface for a large proportion of the film. And of course, famously, Linda Blair is phenomenal. Famously the fact that she could switch between the innocent girl and the manically possessed creature that we see, shows such a strong performance in a child. And I think it's almost entirely reliant on her being able to do that other child actors might not have plausibly been able to carry that off. And famously, as we've gone on to show more possession films, whether it's alien possession, demon possession, whatever kind of films, you often see less able young actors trying to hit that bar that was set by Linda Blair. And as I have said time and time again, when it comes to horror, it is about the personal. There is more horror in the trauma of one person and the threat of death of one person than there is a massacre. If you spend the time investing and caring about the effect that something is happening on a single character, so that as they are becoming as they are under threat and as their lives are at risk, you genuinely care about whether they are going to succumb. It's significantly more interesting than a group of characters who you barely know, who fall into archetypes, who then are just dispatched, at random. And I think the film knows that. Of course, you have the death of the film director, but again, he's not really a character. He's there to almost establish that to escalate it, and of course the symbolism with him falling down the stairs, and the subtext about falling to hell, and again, of course, the same happening to Father Karras at the end. And of course, it then brings up the question about the protagonist and about is this a success or is this a tragedy? Karras dies. Did he need to die? Did he beat the demon, or did he go to hell? And of course, you can read into as you wish, whether you want to go for the sense of self-sacrifice and say, well, he sacrificed himself, therefore he is redeemed, and of course his faith is restored, or you could say, the demon wanted him all along, got him, perhaps the demon succeeded. And I think the fact that it's ambiguous and complicated shows that this film is rich with meaning and subtext. And it's the fact that you can look at it either as a very personal character drama about a girl having some horrifying things happen to her, with the implication that maybe it's a product of horrible things that we aren't aware of, or whether you want to think of it as a grand mythology about demons and the devil and the world that we don't see and what that means. I just think this is a phenomenal film. There is so much going on. It is, as I said at the beginning, one of the greatest horror films ever made, and I think it needs to be appreciated for that. Anyway, thank you for joining me. If you like this video, hit the like button, comment below, and share the video, because those all help me in the algorithm. Subscribe to the channel and hit that bell to get notifications of when new videos are uploaded. Check out my back catalogue of over 250 videos, and follow me on Twitter at Jordan_Woodley, where I tweet about TV shows and films, as well as sharing these videos when they're uploaded either the day of or the day after. Thank you for joining me. Take care.